virtual event representing many different community organisations and partners across our city, along with members of our own workforce, to find out more about how, as a city, we are working together to deliver on our pledge to build a better, fairer and more inclusive Salford. Salford has always been a city that has celebrated and championed its diverse communities, empowering the many and varied voices, helping to make this city such a unique place to live and work. However, we are not blind to the fact that it remains a place where inequality in all its forms is still a reality. And the impact of COVID-19 has only sought to highlight this even further for us. But as we remember the terrible toll that the pandemic has had on families and residents across our communities, it's also time to look to the future as Salford begins its own journey to address inequality and ensure we are a place where everyone who lives and works here in this city feels valued, included and able to participate. Over the next hour, you will hear more about the exciting work taking place as we shine a spotlight on our vision and plans over the coming years, working together with our communities, partners, businesses and workforce to ensure everyone can access the opportunities that they rightly deserve. To help us do that, we will shortly hear from Councillor Sharmina August, lead member for Inclusive Economy, Anti-Poverty and Equalities at the City Council, who will talk about the city's priorities around equality, diversity, inclusion, and what we hope to achieve with this new refreshed strategy. We'll also hear from Kay Fairhurst, Chair of Salford's Disability Forum, who will provide a vital community perspective on her own experiences of inequality and how we can work together to address these. We'll also hear from Councillor Barbara Bentham, Executive Support Member for Workforce and Industrial Relations, alongside our Chief Executive, Tom Stannard, here at the City Council, who will be launching the Council's own Workforce Equality and Inclusion Strategy, showing how the Council is committed to delivering on these commitments within our own organisation. And we'll also have a Q&A panel discussion, which you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions about anything you will have heard today, featuring our speakers alongside Alison Page, Chief Executive of Salford CBS, Salford's local community and voluntary infrastructure organisation, and Salford's Division Chief Superintendent Sean Donnellan at Greater Manchester Police. So if you have any questions for any of our speakers about anything you've heard over the next hour, please do share them in the Q&A function. We'll be monitoring the Q&A function throughout, and I'll do my best to pose as many of those as possible to the panel at the end. Also, if you're active on Twitter and would like to tweet about today's event, please use the hashtag #TheSalfordWay. So, without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce our first speaker this morning, Councillor Sharmina August.
Thanks, Paul, and I agree. It's great to see so many people on the call today, including many of our own Salford City Council employees, and hear more about Salford's journey and our plans to create a fairer and more inclusive Salford over the coming years. As you've already touched upon, the past 18 months have been unlike any other in recent memory, and I'm incredibly proud and humbled at the way we have responded as a city and come together and support each other in a time of great need. However, the simple fact remains that we live in a deeply unequal Britain, and the pandemic has shown that deeply entrenched inequalities continue to lie at the very heart of our society, whether that is inequality of outcome between different groups associated with health, or education, employment, income, or access to services. But as a city, we are determined to take the lessons learned from the pandemic and use this opportunity to put equality at the heart of everything we do in Salford. This new strategy forms a key part of our wider Salford Way approach to addressing inequality, and it is our catalyst for change that strives to ensure we recognise the scale of these challenges and and that we work together to build a fairer and more inclusive Salford for all. It builds on the previous achievements of the 2016 Salford Equality Strategy that included the launch of the Salford Equality Network, a partnership of the public, BCSE and private sector organisations who are committed to improving inclusion in the city through the sharing of learning and best practice. It had the embedding of equality and inclusion within the City Mayor's Employment Standards Charter, ensuring charter mark employers have sound policies and practices in place to actively promote equalities and address discrimination in the workplace. It develops strong community networks to better engage and give voice to those most marginalised in our communities, such as through the city's vocal VCSE forums, NHS citizen panels and the local community committees. It had progress in closing the gender pay gap within some of our public sector organisations, and our hugely successful community programme of annual events celebrating the rich diversity of Salford, such as the magnificent Pink Picnic and events to mark Black History Month, just to name a few. Whilst we want to carry on these amazing achievements, we also know we have to translate the lessons we have learned from the pandemic into key tangible actions to truly achieve equality. This strategy will be our blueprint to achieving that goal. At its heart, there are 4 key priorities. 1, that people are visibly represented in decision making and know that their differences are valued. That people have equal physical and digital access to services and spaces. That people are communicated with in the right language for them while receiving support to access more information. And finally, working to tackle structural racial inequality. For each of these priorities, the strategy provides a number of key commitments we are dedicated to carrying out over the coming years. Some pivotal highlights include committing to reduce the ethnicity and gender pay gaps across all levels of organisations in Salford, to work closely with local education and community learning and support providers to increase the provision and awareness of English for speakers of other language or ESOL courses, adopting a Salford-wide reverse mentoring programme to encourage new and innovative ways to address the barriers to race equality. This will be specifically designed for people from ethnic minorities to mentor senior public and private sector leaders in Salford from white backgrounds. Ensuring all public information and documents are available in a range of communication formats, such as audiovisual, braille and easy read versions. Ensuring staff and volunteers receive appropriate and regular equality and inclusion training to enhance their awareness of Salford's diverse communities and the barriers faced by these communities as a direct result of structural inequality. And I am delighted to announce today that we will shortly be launching the Salford Women and Girls Commission to examine some of the most pressing issues for women in the city later this month. The group will seek to develop recommendations to strengthen the city's response to women's inequality in conjunction with women's organisations and women in our city, and invitations to women's groups and select representatives will be going out after this meeting. These are just a handful of the initiatives we're determined to undertake here in Salford to ensure everyone feels like they have an equal voice, and we are determined to take the hard-learned lessons of the pandemic and use this as an opportunity to put equality at the heart of everything we do. I would now like to take the opportunity to introduce Kay Fairhurst, who's Chair of Salford Disability Forum.
Hello everybody, my name is Kay Fairhurst and currently I am the Chair of Salford Disability Forum. The Forum was set up in 2003 and became a registered charity and limited company in 2006, so we're almost 20 years old. We are an organisation run and managed by disabled people to support disabled people, people with long-term health conditions, their family, friends and carers. We enable them to have a say in issues that affect their lives. We have continued to provide our service to the people of Salford throughout the pandemic and have managed to adapt to include face-to-face visits safely. Our meetings and forums are both face-to-face and online via Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and we post information on our Facebook page daily. We also communicate via emails and phone calls to ensure that we stay connected as much as possible. We provide signpost sessions, although during the last 18 months they have been restricted for a lot of times. We are now in the process of going back out into the community. So currently we're at Princess Park Garden Centre in Earlham and we're at Pendleton Gateway. We're waiting for confirmation of going into the other gateways and to Langworth the Cornerstone and others where possible. So we share information of services and activities around Salford, which enables people to help themselves and, where necessary, support people with advocacy or signpost them to specialist help that they may need. We work with access to all areas on various campaigns. One of those is accessibility in buildings and the built environment, and also on various issues, for example, transport and travel, pavement parking, cycles and e-scooters. And e-scooters have been piloted in Salford, so we've been to a few meetings about that and many more. Our open forums used to be held out in the community, but we now do it via Facebook called Cafe 11s, and it's on the second Friday of each month at 11 o'clock, where we invite speakers on specialist topics and ask people to join in the conversations. We work in partnership with other groups and organisations in Salford and Greater Manchester, with reps on both boards, for example, Access to All Areas, Princess Park Garden Centre, Multiple Sclerosis Society Salford, Salford Deaf Gathering, Salford Mental Health Forum and Salford Council. We also work with the Harbour Social Group, Salford CDS and the Greater Manchester Disabled People's Panel, plus many others. This year, we have worked with others to update this equality strategy and have found this to be an interesting experience in that we've had many discussions on the wording, the statistics and the categories of protected characteristics as listed. During the last 18 months, people were isolated and locked down, leading to a sharp rise in depression, loneliness, isolation and mental health issues. Salford folk were amazing though, giving their time freely across the city, calling people on the phone, bringing shopping and medication to many through the Spirit of Salford Hub. But if you were disabled, deaf or blind, or didn't have a computer at home, how did you find out about this if you couldn't use the phone, or if you didn't have a smartphone, or you couldn't go online to register your needs? This was especially true for disabled people and people with long-term health conditions. Did you know that many families were asked to sign DNRs, do not resuscitate forms, if their family member became ill with COVID in hospital, particularly if people had learning difficulties or if they had an existing long-term health condition or were elderly? That was really stressful, a really terrible time, at a time when most families were already vulnerable and already having a terrible time, and to be asked to sign those forms was absolutely hard. Many social workers Support workers and carers no longer visited disabled people at home, but they were working from home. Many still do, having found they liked it. It is easier than dodging traffic and using public transport when you were told in the early days that people should only travel if necessary. It was also cheaper for both the employer and the worker. So both employers and workers had to adapt their home working environment, and in doing so, disabled people lost that interpersonal contact and much needed support. In going back to work, people are having to relearn how to work together in groups as our communication with each other changes. Meetings through Zoom and Teams has become the buzzwords, and people have been meeting online, but it's definitely not the same. We have had to learn new ways of using technology to communicate with each other. This is especially difficult when the technology fails or when people just don't have the knowledge, skills or training to enable this to happen successfully. I'm using a laptop here myself, but I'm actually here in person as well, so it's kind of using both really. Salford Council is aiming to become a digital city and has developed a digital programme to bring technology to communities. We need to do this in an inclusive and innovative way that ensures we don't lose the connectivity of people in favour of technology. Our abilities may be different for each of us. However, this becomes challenging and can be explained when we say disabilities, with the DIS before abilities. For example, D equals discrimination, in the form of how people with impairments are treated differently, seen as less able and often paid less. I equals ignorance of the wide variety of impairments and health conditions, many hidden, that people may have and how these affect them every day. And S equals society's label that creates barriers to participation in the same way as everyone else, through inaccessible services, activities, and being involved in decisions that affect us. We use the social model of disability when we talk about people with sensory, physical, mental, learning and hidden impairments and health conditions, and how it is factors such as attitudes, lack of knowledge and our environment that disables people, not the medical model which labels the impairment or health condition as the disability. We fully support the strategy to empower individuals to get involved in decision making, to enable people with any impairment to achieve their full potential, and to encourage integration, mutual appreciation, and a better understanding of each other, to learn to work together to create a fairer and equal society. Thank you. I'd like now to hand back to Paul.
Okay, thank you very much, Faye. I think at this point in the proceedings, what we're going to do now is play the Community Voices video, which offers some insight from the city's voluntary community and social enterprise groups. And also it's a way to find out what they think needs to change to put everyone in our city on an equal footing. So let's play the Community Voices video. Thank you.
Inequalities are different for different people. For example, different groups like LGBT, people, someone who has got some disabilities, or people from ethnic minority background have got different issues
I've experienced inequalities over quite a lot over since I've lived here. I've lived here about 15 years now. Most recent one has been literally this week, where I've been called the F word, the H word, and that's actually in my own block of flats where I live.
So we daily see people with issues, for example, benefits in housing and signing up to GP services. These are, for example, refugees, asylum seekers who don't have the English language.
People who need assessments from social services, not getting their needs met.
Yeah, loads of time I've experienced inequality, and discrimination.
Well, as a woman in Salford, to access mental health help, counselling or anything like that, they don't take into account whether you've got any children to find care for, to actually go and get this help.
Because if you need something and you need to talk to somebody, to find a person that knows what that disability is you're talking about is very, very hard.
I'm a father of a Down syndrome boy who's now 41 years of age. And when he was in his 20s, he used to spend 2.5 days at college and 2 days at a day centre run by the council. But then the colleges were stopped for him because he couldn't read or write, and it really upset him because what he was doing dancing, cookery, basic life skills. And even now, as we pass the Worsley College, he says, why can't I go back there?
I mean, everybody in the UK who are deaf have experienced this. It's the use of masks during the pandemic. Total discrimination for us deaf people. A lot of my friends are in the same boat, have experienced the same thing, that anger of not being able to understand. And all it is just asking people just to lower the mask so I can lip read them.
I think the pandemic has made it hard to be treated equally. Communities that we work with who are mostly disadvantaged and with little or no English language, they were left in the dark and they had no support, so they couldn't access basic necessities and they couldn't access important information relaying from government and local council as well.
Salford City Council is doing a lot to work with different partners and organizations to see how we could actually bring this gap to minimum.
I think an equality strategy is really important for me to include a pan-sectional approach to tackling inequality. I think inequality arises from a multi-dimensional aspect of life. It comes from education, it comes from awareness, from housing. Every aspect of our lives impacts somebody's inequality.
I think the kind of support we can use to tackle inequality in Salford is better educational opportunities for people who are local in the area, and that could be further education, just anything people can access.
I think one of the key things the strategy should include is training. That's not just for the general public on inequalities, to raise awareness and community cohesion, but more directly aimed at like the police and ambulance and fire themselves on how to actually treat LGBT people when they are engaging with them. It has been recently reported, quite sadly, that sometimes when homophobic attack or crime has been reported, that the police generally don't want to deal with it because they just don't know how to.
If organisations can offer cultural and dialect awareness sessions, whereas you understand the people that you're working with.
And more places like the Salford Women's Centre for them to just come and sort of socialise with other women in a safe space as well.
But the main thing is, even though we have got the strategy, it is important that we know how we are going to implement it and how we are going to work with different organizations, both strategic and non-strategic organizations. Then only it will make a difference, then only it will work, then it will see a difference in Salford.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to everyone who participated in that fantastic video, really highlighting challenges across the city, but also insight into how we operationalise this strategy. And thanks to everyone who participated in pulling that really impactful video together. So we're now at the point with the agenda where I'm going to hand over to Councillor Barbara Bentham and Tom Stannard to specifically talk about the City Council's workforce strategy. So over to
Equality
Councillor Barbara
basically
Benton.
means
Thank
being
you.
equal, and it's about.
Thank you, Paul. As Executive Support Member for Workforce and Industrial Relations, I'm really pleased to be able to share with you Salford City Council's Workforce, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy. Based on everything that we've heard so far today, we feel it was really important for the Council to set out a clear vision and plan around equality, diversity and inclusion for our workforce. Through this strategy, we are absolutely committed to developing an inclusive culture where individuals are respected and treated fairly, where diversity is celebrated, and where everyone, regardless of background, is able to reach their full potential. We want everyone working at the council to feel valued and included and to be able to have a voice. We also want to have a workforce that's representative of Salford's increasingly diverse population, so that our people not only have greater understanding and engagement with our communities, but also our residents see themselves represented in the services that we provide. Although we've made progress on this agenda, we know we need to do more. And what's really important about this strategy is it's been developed through conversations and input from our workforce, and in particular, our staff equality groups and networks and our trade union colleagues. The 4 priorities set out in this strategy are therefore the ones we believe will have the greatest impact in bringing about positive change over the next 12 months and beyond. I will now hand over to Chief Exec Tom Stannard, who's going to say a few words about the strategy. Thanks, Tom.
Barbara, thank you very much, and real pleasure to be here today to be part of the launch of both of these really important plans for the City of Salford. I've been really clear from day one in the role as Chief Exec at the Council that equality, diversity and inclusion are my top priorities, and therefore this strategy, I believe, is the vital first step in setting out the Council's intentions and, most importantly, our commitments to our workforce across the city. Our employees are our greatest asset, absolutely, in delivering a better and fairer Salford for all. And in line with our values, what we want to do is create an environment where difference of background, experience and thought is really welcomed and valued. Since taking up post at the Council, I've spoken with the workforce and with trade unions, and also met with each of our staff groups to talk about EDI and to listen directly to feedback and experiences. And this workforce strategy helps us to capture the very things people have told us are the most important and make the biggest difference. But I've also been clear since joining Salford about how important and how powerful I think people's lived experience, including my own, can be in demonstrating that discrimination affects us all, and particularly in countering the perception that discrimination is only experienced by people who fit neatly into protected characteristic groups. And I really do feel strongly that we need now to open up this debate using the workforce strategy across the whole organisation, and to properly understand the role played by unconscious bias, something that I'm particularly keen to better train and better engage managers and staff across the council on. And that's why our 4 key workforce EDI priorities are: firstly, actively developing our leaders; secondly, building confidence through improving education, awareness and training; thirdly, improving workforce intelligence, insights and representation; and fourthly, targeted interventions to understand and reduce those gender and ethnicity pay gaps that we know still exist across the organisation. And in a similar way to the city-wide strategy, under each of these priorities we've set out some key commitments for us over the next few years, and some of those important highlights of those priorities include piloting a new Salford-wide reverse mentoring programme to encourage new and innovative ways to address the barriers to race equality; better understanding what it really feels like to work at the council through sharing lived experience, as I've mentioned before, and creating safe spaces to have open and continuing conversations about all of those issues; ensuring all staff receive appropriate equality training to challenge unconscious bias; improving cultural awareness across the workforce through recognising and celebrating key dates in our inclusion calendar in more creative and innovative ways; expanding and enhancing our recruitment outreach to attract more diverse talent to the council, reviewing selection practices to focus on raising awareness of unconscious bias and greater diversity of selection panels, both in internal and in external recruitment, and exploring the setup of a women's staff network to better understand some of the key issues facing women working at the council and strengthen our response as an employer to these issues. And we are also, as I mentioned previously, looking at developing and introducing that new training programme on unconscious bias, with the intention from me that all staff across the council will participate in this once it's launched. So these are really just a snapshot of some of the commitments we will deliver over the coming years to bring about real change on the back of these strategies within the council. And the next step for us is to continue our engagement and dialogue with the workforce, working together to make sure that the strategy is brought to life, embedded in everything we do, and most importantly, seen as everybody's responsibility to deliver. So thanks for listening to my part of the introduction this morning, and we would now like to share with you a very short film showing some members of our staff groups and our trade union colleagues talking about EDI for you all. Thank you.
Equality basically means being equal. It's about equal access, equal care, equal opportunities for all. And I don't know why anybody wouldn't want that.
Diversity of people, of backgrounds, of heritage, of culture, it brings something hugely important that benefits all of us. And it's right that as a local authority, we're at the forefront of challenging ourselves in ensuring that when we are properly acting on equality, diversity and inclusion. Now, equality is one thing, equality is right, and it's all well and good, and there are legal obligations around it to ensure that people aren't treated differently because of their background, their gender, their sexuality, whether they're disabled, their race, their age, and other protected characteristics. It's right that we have that obligation and that commitment around equality. But equality on its own, essentially, to me, takes the view that, well, you know, we have to treat people equally because there's a right to do that. Almost as though that's an obligation, not an opportunity. And that's why I think the diversity and inclusion is so important here, because this should not be seen as an obligation. This should be seen as a positive. It should be seen as something that we welcome. Diversity of people, of backgrounds, of heritage, of culture, it brings something hugely important that benefits all of us. So embracing diversity, whether we have to or not, is absolutely key if we want this council to be as positive a place to work in as possible, and if we want the services that we deliver to not only be as inclusive as possible, but also to be as good as possible, to take the benefits from each of the cultures that are increasingly represented in the city, to take the experiences and the learning of people of different backgrounds. That's absolutely vital if we want to be as positive in our vision for Salford as possible.
So I've worked here for 25 years now at the council, and I've had really positive experiences. I think that probably relates directly to my leaders now. I can feel comfortable, confident to bring my whole self to work. And my managers actively support me all the time to be involved in staff groups, and they promote equality and diversity and inclusion across the City Council.
Can highlight how people can be allies and how they can support. I think educating people on unconscious bias will be really helpful, and challenging those stereotypes too. I think we need to talk more as a society. I think we need to tackle prejudice, and we also need to be patient with those people that really want to learn and really want to do better as well.
Claire, I think our group really welcomes this equality and diversity and inclusion strategy, and we think it can make a real difference. And it sets out the vision and ambitions on what we want to achieve, and that's really important. We really hope that it's going to be an active document, and believe it will be an active document and won't sit on the shelf. And our group really wants to contribute to improving equality, diversity and inclusion within the council?
I'm part of the BAME staff group at Salford Council, and it's something I'm really proud of. And this staff group, along with all of the other staff groups, really enables us to have a voice. And I think it's really important that we use that voice, and not only for ourselves and for society, but also for those who don't have a voice and for the younger generations too. It's all about us working together to really make sure that it's a great future for people. Equality, diversity and inclusion is something that we must continuously work towards, and it will take joint input, it will take compassion, collaboration and patience, but eventually if we all work together, we truly will achieve an inclusive environment.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks to all members of the City Council who've worked on pulling that really informative video together. Really appreciate that. So in terms of where we're at on today's agenda, we're now moving into the question and answers session, and we are now going to be joined by Alison Page, Chief Exec of Salford CVS, and obviously all the speakers we've heard of, and also we're going to be joined by Sean Donnellan, who's the Chief Superintendent of the Salford District Command. So I've had a few questions come through in the chat, and I've been trying really speedily to keep up with them all. I don't think I'm succeeding necessarily, but let's crack on. One of the first questions that we've been asked is, how can people and businesses get involved with the Salford Equality Network? I was thinking about coming to probably Tom Stannard in the first instance on this one, as well as Alison Page maybe. So Tom, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is about engagement across the whole economy for the city, and it's not just, I think it is a very important leadership role for us as the council, Paul, but I think most partner organisations take that upon themselves, and my experience in other cities and absolutely in Salford to date has been that businesses see the economic benefit and the economic return to them of being progressive employers on this whole agenda. I mean, I was out just last week talking to Talk down at the soap works in the Keys about precisely this, the benefit for them in having an inclusive environment, in promoting equality, diversity and inclusive outcomes through their supply chains and more, brings not just a financial return, but a benefit for them in terms of the culture and motivation of their workforce. So I think it's a two-way street with employers. We obviously need to do more to engage them, but I think we can absolutely sell this as being a positive economic benefit for the city and part of that progressive environment with private sector employers that we want to work with. So I'd very much want and intend to be part and parcel of that conversation with the business community.
Great, thanks very much for that, Tom. Alison, are you wanting to add anything further to that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good question. I think when we say involve, it's got to be a two-way street, isn't it? People feel that they've got something to contribute, as well as maybe getting some benefit. And also I think influence is really important. So I think the plan this time in terms of relaunching the Salford Equalities Network, and I like to say equalities rather than equality, that's just my own personal belief, but is to make sure that we do involve a wide range of partners, and particularly want to make sure, and we achieved this last time I think after 2016 launch, is we get lots of community organisations that represent the interests and needs and our people with lived experience. They are those people in communities of geography, locality, place, identity, experience and interest. So I think for me it's really important that we give people every opportunity to get involved, but what I would like to see is a small number of key things that we can agree to achieve and work on together with some practical application, because I think that will mean that people feel that they're making a difference.
Great, thank you very much, Tom and Alison. So I'm going to move on with another question now, and the question is, how important do you think the role of lived experience is to ensure the equality strategy's goals are realised here in Salford? I'm first going to come probably to Councillor August on this.
Thank you, Paul. They're vital. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't have written this strategy without listening to real lived experience. And because of the pandemic, we couldn't do that as much as I wanted to. Obviously, I wanted to get out there and talk to as many people as possible. But when you're social distancing, running up to people and hugging them and asking them what they think about the city isn't great. But this isn't just a glossy document or a glossy PDF in this case. It's a real piece of work with actions attached to it, and it's not a council-led piece of work either. This is for the whole of Salford. It isn't just what we as the council should be doing, it's what all our partners across the city are doing, and we should be listening to people to say whether we're getting that right or wrong. It's not set in stone. That's a great thing about not printing off hundreds of copies of it and having it as a digital document. If we've not got it right and people with real lived experience are saying, actually, this is what needs to be done as well, we can move and change that. And that's a key priority for me, is to make sure that we listen to people and work with them and don't just rigidly stick to things that aren't working because we've said that that's how we're going to do it.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor August. Councillor Bentham, are you wanting to add anything to that from a workforce perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Paul. We're really pleased with the workforce policy and in particular the reverse mentoring, because we think it's vital that the people in the city that are making the decisions understand what it's like for the people that have those characteristics. We're really, really proud of our reverse mentoring programme. I think it's going to be innovative. And hopefully this policy will evolve as we have that lived experience. If our leaders are listening to those that understand what it's like on the ground to have those characteristics, it's crucial. Thank you. Thanks, Paul.
Great, thanks very much, Councillor Bentham. I was also going to come to Kay Fairhurst on this question, because I think it's really important we get a kind of non-council perspective on the importance of lived experience. So, Kay, is there anything you would like to add on this question?
Yes, thanks, Paul. I think if you don't work with people with lived experience, it's only theory, isn't it? You're only actually working on the what if or the what might happen or whatever. If you actually work with people who can actually talk about what it's really like every day, then you're going to get a better sense of what that is and how you can work together better.
Great. Thank you very much, colleagues. I think those are really good responses to that question, and thanks for the individual who posed that. I think we all agree lived experience needs to be at the heart of the strategy itself, but also how we then operationalise it. Okay, the next question is for Sean Donnellan, and I'll read the question out. It says, it's great to see that tackling structural racism highlighted as a key priority within the strategy. How can we ensure police powers such as stop and search are not being unequally enforced against individuals from ethnic minority backgrounds by the police? Sean, can I bring you on this?
Thanks, City Mayor. Really good question. I don't know who posted it, but very, very thoughtful and incisive. You know, history has proven that when we get stop search wrong, there's disastrous effects all the way back to 1980, Bristol riots, 81, Toxteth, Moss Side, Manchester, 1990, London, and so on and so on. It's a hugely important question, because I think what police forces generally are very good at are publicising the nice things we do, which is good. But of course, if it's your son or daughter or brother who stopped at midnight in the city centre of Manchester and, you know, stop searched and you don't fully understand why, then it's very unsettling. As well as Commander for Salford, I own stop search on behalf of the Chief Constable for the entire Greater Manchester area, so I'm quite an appropriate person to speak to, really. Hence the fact to recognise the importance of the question. So I'll answer it this way. I think it's all about strong governance. We've got really strong governance locally at force level from the Mayor's office and also nationally. I'm part of a national group that reports back into the Home Office about stop search, and they ask them really difficult questions about ethnicity. Officers have to have the body-worn video on, which captures the entire event, both in sound and the actual imagery. That video is then inspected locally by either the independent advisory group or the new scrutiny panels, which are just enacted in GMP. So there's a really great deal of scrutiny. As well as that, I chair the Stop Search Coordination Group, in fact I'm doing it this week, which is made up of senior police officers from across Greater Manchester, also from members of the public and interested parties, and we've got 2 PhDs who are doing a doctorate on it, one from Manchester, one from Liverpool. And what's really interesting, how the academics see it, they say, well, it's okay having governance around the 23-year-old cop who stops somebody on nights and, you know, may not fully understand what they're doing. But what he's encouraging us to do is to roll back from there and look at who put that cop in, for example, Salford Precinct, and what was on their mind. And what we're uncovering is there is quite a lot of unconditional, I should say, unconscious bias on behalf of how we task and we allocate officers. That areas are seen as troublesome, ergo we'll put some officers in there. And unfortunately, we don't fully understand the impact on it. So that's something I'm working through with the academics. I think there's a lot of work going on in relation to it, City Mayor. I can assure that the person asking the question that it's one of those things in policing that in my service I've never seen go away, and I don't think it ever will go away, because for me it's a really intrusive police power, and we've got to get it right. And I'll just throw one out to the, you know, to the person who asked the question. One of the things I'm struggling with now is about young people. Young people, if they're arrested or they're even interviewed, there's a real rigour around having parents there, appropriate adults, but any officer can stop anybody of any age and require them to be stop searched, which seems to me not an altogether healthy position. So that's one of the things we're working out. I can't tell the person this who asked the question that in terms of ethnicity, Greater Manchester Police do proportionally stop search more people of ethnic backgrounds. That's a fact. The figures are there to prove it. However, within the figures, there's an awful lot of things we don't fully understand about it. What the academics are calling it is the, you know, they will say, well, hang on a minute, the population of Salford is this, the minority ethnic is this, and you stop search that many. But what the academics are saying, well, that's not altogether true, because it's only the population who are available to be stop searched, what they're increasingly calling the street population, which may not be the same as the actual ethnic makeup of that diverse figures. So it's something we're working through. It's top of our agenda, or one of the things on top of our agenda. I can give you my personal assurance that I own it for Greater Manchester, and that nothing will happen in GM as long as I'm in charge of it that in any way disadvantages anybody from a minority group. And I'm more than happy to have further conversations about this as we go on, and I'm more than happy to be challenged by our City Mayor and the politicians. And that pretty much sums it up for me, City Mayor.
Thank you very much, Sean, and thanks for that detailed and robust response to that very pertinent question, and really reassuring to hear that you lead for GMP on stop and search. So thanks, and thanks also for welcoming that ongoing accountability and transparency around this agenda. I certainly know, politically speaking, this is something that people are concerned about, and it's really great to see people asking those questions. So, and thanks for your honesty and frankness in answering that. That's great. Okay, I'm going to move on next with the next question. I'm going to direct this one to Councillor August. The question is, I would like to ask whether there is an explicit commitment to trans rights within this strategy. Councillor August.
Yes, absolutely there is. So we talk about LGBTQ plus rights, but diving into trans rights specifically, we believe that trans women are women, trans men are men, and their rights should be protected. Trans people are incredibly marginalised, they're more likely to face violence, they're more likely to have mental health problems and all these sorts of things. And we've been working on trans rights at the council for some time. We have a strategy for trans people, if staff members, we fly the trans flag, but also all of these things we've talked about apply to trans people as well. So when we talk about having more representation, when we talk about making sure services are appropriate, this applies to trans people as well. And it's something that we are incredibly aware of at the moment. There is a lot of hate towards our trans community, but we want to know that they are welcome here in Salford and are part of our community and part of who we are.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor August. Councillor Bentham, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that from a workforce perspective.
I would just say, Paul, that we have a very good close working relationship with all of our staff groups, including the LGBTQ plus group, and that the policy is designed to be fluid. So if there's something that we haven't got quite right, well, we're listening. So, you know, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bentham. Okay, great. So moving on to the next question, and I'm going to, in the first instance, direct this to Tom Stannard. The question is, how does the city envision itself working with partners in the private sector to tackle structural racism and other forms of inequality within the workplace? Tom.
I think it links to a couple of the comments I made earlier, Paul, which is probably most importantly, the private sector, in my experience in Salford, recognises that there is a business benefit to doing this. There is a legal obligation, but most importantly, there is a business benefit. There is both financial return and there is employee well-being and employee retention and staff development benefit to be gleaned by companies in the private sector taking this whole agenda seriously. And that's not just the large employers who absolutely, I think, get this agenda, but it's medium and smaller employers as well. I think where we can help and where we need to play an active role in that space, though, is modelling that behaviour as an employer ourselves. And I think that is a really important facet of the workforce strategy, is us leading the debate and demonstrating that we are taking this agenda extremely seriously for the city, but as an employer in our own right. And helping where we can, I think, with the training programmes and other interventions, particularly with the medium and smaller sized employers who often find, you know, compliance with lots of new government legislation and requirements more challenging just because they've got less capacity. I think there's still more that we can do to really take this agenda out to them, demonstrate business benefits and show what we're doing as well in our leadership role across the city. So there's a lot in that, but I think there's a really important leverage role that we can play in the wider economy across companies of all sizes, really, in the private sector.
Great, thanks for that, Tom. I'm going to come to Alison to see if she wants to add anything further on that. Obviously, Alison works very closely with our voluntary community and social enterprise sector within the city of Salford. So, Alison, anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I mean, I think, you know, it's important for any of us who certainly are responsible for a workforce, you know, including any voluntary sector organisations that have paid staff. But I think even those organisations that are made up of volunteers really need to think about what's our role in tackling structural racism. We're all too aware of the murder of George Floyd, but the murder of George Floyd was just one of many black people who've been murdered. And disproportionately discriminated against in quite serious and violent ways. So I think we really need to think about what we're going to do as a city. And I think it ties into that whole question about how do we make this city safe for people, because I know there's a question about women and girls as well. But I think in terms of tackling structural racism, and then there are some recommendations in the strategy that I think people should look at closely, because we want to try and get all employees from whichever sectors they're involved to sign up to some of those things and to take practical action. So, you know, Tom talked about unconscious bias training, and I think that goes so far because that's about awareness raising, but it's also about having much more proactive policies and procedures and actions, I think, in place. And that's where I think, as Irfan said in the film, implementation of this strategy is now key, isn't it? What are we all going to sign up to and take practical action, and what are our top 2 or 3 priorities going to be? The strategy's got 4 priorities and this is one, and it's an absolute central pillar, isn't it, in terms of working together to tackle structural racism. Thank you.
Great. No, thank you very much, Alison and Tom. Thanks for the response on that question. I'm going to move next now on to the next question, which is around participation in local democracy. So I'll probably come to the councillors to respond on this. But the question is, how do we get more people to participate in local democracy from underrepresented groups? For instance, should measures such as diversity quotas be in place to ensure decisions are made by those who are representative of Salford communities? Councillor August, do you want to respond first on this?
Thank you. Yes, I think it's incredibly important that we have people from all backgrounds involved in local democracy. And I don't just mean that in terms of elected representatives, although I think our elected representatives should be more reflective of our communities. I know certainly in the Labour Party we have quotas for having women councillors, and we're getting towards where we want to be on that. We have had a huge increase in the number of BAME councillors that we have on our benches at the moment, but for example we don't have any trans councillors, we don't have any openly gay women on our benches, and that is something that I want to address. But I do think there is a place for discussion around how people can be involved without being elected representatives. We don't have enough people coming to our committee meetings as lay members. We don't have people finding our structures as accessible as they should be. You know, not everybody, most people I think don't want to drive down to the town hall and come and listen to quite a stuffy meeting that's not particularly accessible. So it's something that we are thinking about. How do we make it so that people are able to come, but also interested enough to come? Are we telling people what we're talking about enough? Are we telling people about, if you come along, here's how you can get involved? And are we reaching out to so-called hard to reach communities? I always think that they're not necessarily hard to reach. We're just not trying the right way. As it's not a term I'm particularly a fan of, if I'm honest. But I'm open to all ideas. I have many of my own ideas, but I'm not part of all of the marginalised and underrepresented communities in Salford and across the country. So I'm always open. My inbox is open, but get me on Twitter or something like that, much easier. Tell me how you want to be involved in our local democracy more. Yeah, that's all I can say. We have a lot of work to do. We're getting there, but it's a long way to go.
Thank you very much, Councillor August. Councillor Bentham, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. In terms of diversity, the council has become much more diverse over just the last 6 years that I've been elected for. We're now much more representative. We have women, ethnic minorities, and even age is now more balanced across the makeup of members of the council. We're looking as well, we're working quite closely together, Sharmina and I, on barriers to people standing for public service, such as parental responsibilities and other issues that might be a huge disincentive for people of certain ages or genders to get involved. So yeah, and as Sharmina has said, it's a fluid, moving policy, and if you've got thoughts and ideas, then please get in touch. We'd love to listen. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Bentham. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I was just quickly reflecting on the different ethnicities that are now represented on the council. You know, we've got Bangladeshi, Jamaican, Ukrainian, Banyamalengi, Ghanaian, Burundian, Jewish and Indian. And, you know, that is a great achievement in what has been a fairly short space of time. So, yeah, more to be done, but we are certainly making progress. Great, thank you very much. OK, moving on to the next question, and I'm going to come to Kay Fairhurst for this. It's a straightforward question. It's how can someone connect with Salford Disability Forum? Kay.
Well, like I said earlier, we are on emails, we are on a phone, we are on Facebook, Now, I know not everybody's on social media, but I'm quite happy to give anybody my phone number if they want to get in touch. We are always looking for people to join us. We have got an AGM, I know I shouldn't say it here, but we've got an AGM coming up on the 23rd. So definitely we need more people to join us. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me, please do.
Okay, thank you very much, Kay. Really appreciate it. I'm just conscious of time, and people have clearly got a lot of questions around the strategy, how we operationalise it, and unfortunately we're not going to be able to get through all of these questions today. However, I am prepared to make a commitment to making sure we respond to all of the questions that have been asked. I know there's been questions around the socio-economic duty referenced in the strategy. There's also questions around the workforce in terms of reflecting our communities that we seek to serve. There's some questions come in as well around the elimination of violence against women and girls. And there's also another question around the impact of health reforms on this strategy, specifically referencing the integrated care system that's been established at a Greater Manchester level. So we will make sure that we respond to every single question that colleagues have asked today and partners have asked today, and residents who may be joining us. But just from me, I'd just like to say thank you to our fantastic panel for participating today. Thanks to Alison, Sharmina, Barbara, Kay, Sean and Tom. I think you've done a sterling job there. And also thanks to everyone who's been involved in the new equality and inclusion strategy and the City Council's own workforce inclusion strategy. I know a lot of work has gone into this. I know we've placed co-production at the heart of all of this. And now I think we're in that phase of operationalising it, delivering on our commitments within these two strategic documents for the City Council and our workforce, but importantly for the people of Salford. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us today. I hope you found this really informative, and I really look forward to working with you all to really operationalise this and ensure equalities is at the heart of everything we do here in the City of Salford. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day and the week ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.